Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. 3 days of silence can feel like a lifetime when it comes from someone who used to look at you like you were the center of their world. For 3 days, my wife, Emily, didn't speak a word to me. No good mornings, no texts, no eye contact. Just the soft clink of her coffee mug on the counter and the quiet hum of her iPhone as she scrolled through Instagram like I didn't exist. It started on a Sunday morning. We were at Olive Garden, sitting across from each other, when she laughed, too loud, too freely, at something our waiter said. When I looked up, she didn't even notice. And then, like a knife slipped between ribs, she said, almost under her breath, but just loud enough for me to hear, "You've gotten so predictable, Ethan." No argument. No explanation. Just that one word, and then silence. At first, I thought she needed space. I gave it. I made her breakfast, picked up groceries from Walmart, even left little notes by her coffee cup like I used to. She ignored them all. Every move I made seemed invisible. Every word I said landed in a void. And still, I stayed calm. I told myself it would pass. But something shifted on the second night. I saw her on the couch, scrolling through Amazon, smiling faintly at something on her screen. That smile didn't belong to me anymore. It hit harder than any insult could have. By the third day, her silence wasn't a wall. It was a message. It said, "I don't have to fight with you. You're already beneath my attention." And that's when the noise inside me stopped too. No anger. No pleading. Just clarity. That night, while she sat in the kitchen sipping Starbucks and pretending I wasn't there, I looked at her and felt nothing. The same nothing she'd been giving me for 72 hours. But for me, it wasn't punishment, it was a release. I went upstairs, grabbed my laptop, and opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. Old plans, business ideas I'd shelved when our marriage became my full-time project. I started making notes again. My hands moved fast, steady. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for her to look at me. When she finally glanced up from her phone later that night, she must have noticed something different in my face, something colder, quieter. She blinked, like she couldn't read me anymore. Her silence had been meant to hurt, but it did something else instead. It emptied the last corner of me that still cared to chase her approval. And by the next hour, she would learn that I no longer did. The morning after her third day of silence, something inside me had already clicked into place. I didn't tell her I was done caring. She would see it. People always notice absence louder than words. I left the house early, didn't make coffee, didn't check if she'd woken up. The quiet between us used to feel heavy. That day, it felt clean. At work, my coworker Josh stopped by my desk. He'd known Emily for years. Our wives used to hang out. He looked at me like he was deciding whether to say something. "Man, you didn't hear this from me," he said finally. "But Emily's been at lunch with her trainer a few times. Different side of town." He paused. "You deserve to know." Then he walked off. It didn't even sting the way I thought it would. Maybe because I'd already felt the truth in her silence. For 3 days, she'd been speaking a different language, one made of distance and performance. I opened her Instagram later that night, something I never did, and there it was, a story from that same restaurant Josh mentioned. Her reflection in the wine glass, a second hand in the photo, cropped just enough to look accidental. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I sat on the couch and watched her as she walked around our kitchen like a stranger. She wore the same soft gray Lululemon hoodie I bought her for Christmas. It looked like a uniform now, comfort wrapped around indifference. She scrolled her phone again, probably Amazon or Facebook Marketplace, while I watched the last fragments of our life fall into place like puzzle pieces that no longer fit. That night, I stopped waiting for her to notice me. Instead, I opened my old notebook, the one filled with plans from before we got married. I made a list of what to sell, what to move, what to rebuild. Not to hurt her, just to reclaim myself. The next day, I didn't text her. I didn't respond when she sighed loud enough for me to hear. I didn't look up when she walked past me in that silent storm she called power. For the first time, the silence worked in my favor. It became armor. When I left for work, she asked if I'd be home for dinner. Her voice broke the air like a misplaced sound. I just nodded. I knew she felt the shift, even if she couldn't name it yet. That night, she'd be the one waiting for me. But I wouldn't be there. Not really. Something colder had taken my place, something she had created herself. I didn't need Josh's words to know something was off, but they confirmed what I already felt in her silence. The next few days, I started paying attention to the small details I'd once ignored. The late-night texts she hid behind a turned screen, the way her perfume lingered when she said she was just running to Target, the sudden distance in her eyes when she said my name. On Wednesday night, I came home early. Her car was in the driveway, lights on in the kitchen, but she wasn't there. Her phone buzzed on the counter, screen lighting up for half a second. I wasn't the type to check, but silence changes you. It teaches you to read what's not being said. I glanced at it. The name on the message was saved under something harmless, Matt Jim, but the last preview line said enough. Same time tomorrow? I can't stop thinking about you. I stood there, staring at those words, and it felt strange how calm I was. No shouting, no slamming doors. Just the slow understanding that whatever we'd built was already gone. I took a step back, looked around the kitchen. The Target candle she loved flickered low, half-burned. Her favorite mug, still warm. She wasn't careful. She was comfortable. That night, she came home late. Her hair was a mess, cheeks flushed, the smell of someone else's cologne faint under her perfume. She didn't speak. Neither did I. The silence between us had changed shape. It wasn't punishment anymore. It was evidence. I didn't ask her anything. Instead, I spent the next morning preparing. I checked our joint account, made copies of a few statements. Transfers, charges, dinners that didn't add up. I wasn't planning revenge. I was collecting truth. Quietly, strategically. When she came downstairs, she looked surprised to see me dressed. "You're leaving early?" she asked. I nodded. That was all. She hesitated, maybe expecting me to say something. I didn't. The power she thought she had was slipping, though she didn't see it yet. At work, I felt something I hadn't in years: focus. It was as if my mind had cleared. The silence she'd used to control me had turned into fuel. Every notification, every missed call, every unread text, each one made me stronger. By the end of that week, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to argue, explain, or expose her. I was going to disappear, not in anger, but in control. And when she realized I was gone, it wouldn't be the loss that broke her. It would be the quiet I left behind. The night before I disappeared, everything looked painfully ordinary. Emily was in the living room, half wrapped in a blanket, scrolling through her phone. Netflix played something in the background, some show she wasn't really watching. I stood by the doorway for a moment, memorizing the scene. It wasn't love anymore. It was routine dressed as comfort. I'd become background noise in my own home. When she went upstairs, I opened my laptop and started closing down shared accounts. Netflix, Amazon, even the grocery delivery we always used from Walmart. Little things that connected us, thread by thread, quietly cut. By midnight, everything was ready. The next morning, I'd be gone. At dawn, I packed light. A small bag, my passport, my MacBook, and the calmest silence I'd ever carried. I left my phone on the kitchen counter beside her coffee mug. No note. No explanation. She'd understand the message in the absence. By noon, I was 3 hours away, sitting in a diner off the highway, drinking black coffee and watching the rain hit the glass. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. A new number, a new plan. I didn't check the old one. I knew what the messages would say. Confusion, anger, questions, but not remorse. That part would come later, when the noise around her ran out. For the next few days, I stayed off-grid. No calls, no social media, nothing. I watched her from a distance. Our shared accounts still gave me a window into her panic. Card declines, missed deliveries. Her Uber receipts told a story of someone spiraling, visiting old friends, then driving back alone. She thought silence was control. Now she was living in it. On the fourth night, she posted a photo. A glass of wine, captioned some peace finally. But the hand in the picture trembled. You can always tell when peace is just a disguise for fear. I booked a room for another week. Didn't check the time, didn't care about the date. The stillness around me wasn't lonely, it was clean. I wasn't running from her. I was returning to myself. Somewhere around the 5th day, she started calling my office. My boss said she sounded calm at first, then desperate. "Tell him to come home," she said. "He'll understand." But I already did. I'd understood everything in the moment she went silent. She wanted distance. Now she had it. And she was finally starting to hear how loud her silence really was. The plan was never to ruin her. It was to watch the game she created turn on itself. Distance gives you perspective, and from where I was, the cracks in her world were easy to see. I didn't have to lift a finger. Truth has a way of surfacing on its own when you stop protecting lies. While staying in that small motel outside town, I got a call from Josh again. He didn't know where I was, but he knew something was happening. He said Matt, the trainer, the man she'd been seeing, was in trouble. Word had spread that he'd been fired from the gym for inappropriate conduct. I didn't react. Josh didn't know I'd quietly forwarded screenshots from their messages to the gym's corporate email a few days earlier. Nothing personal, just information. It wasn't revenge. It was order returning. I spent the afternoon in a diner, same booth, same coffee. It was quiet except for the soft hum of conversation and the sound of a waitress refilling cups. Across from me, a man was scrolling through his phone, laughing at something his wife sent him. For a moment, I wondered if I'd ever be that open again. Then I realized I didn't need to be. Not yet. Back home, Emily's life started to unravel in small, visible ways. Friends stopped replying to her posts. A coworker unfollowed her. Her social circle had been built on performance, and now that the show was over, no one stayed for the silence. I knew she was trying to reach me, emails, messages to my office, even one to my mother, but I didn't respond. My absence had become a mirror she couldn't look away from. One night, while checking the shared account history, I saw a new transaction, Target. She'd bought candles, maybe trying to fill the emptiness with something warm and artificial. I could almost picture her lighting them, sitting in the kitchen alone, waiting for the sound of the front door. Meanwhile, I'd started something new. Quietly, privately. The old business plan I'd ignored for years began to take shape again. My focus sharpened, my calm became discipline. I wasn't angry anymore. I was rebuilding, and every hour she spent lost in confusion only made me stronger. She had used silence to test me. I used it to reset my life. And somewhere deep down, she was starting to understand the difference. Her silence had been punishment. Mine was evolution. I came back to town 2 weeks later. Not home, just near enough to see things from the outside. The first time I passed our house, her car was still in the driveway, but the curtains were closed tight. That used to bother me, the idea of being shut out. Now it looked peaceful, like a door I'd finally learned not to knock on. Josh met me for coffee at Starbucks that morning. He looked at me with a mix of concern and curiosity. "You know she's been asking around about you, right?" he said. "Told people you're on some kind of break." I smiled at that word, break, as if distance was temporary, as if I'd left with the intention of coming back to what broke me in the first place. He hesitated before speaking again. "You heard about Matt, yeah? The gym thing?" I nodded. "He's gone. Fired. Word got around fast. His reputation's done." Josh studied me, waiting for a reaction. I didn't give him one. I just said, things fall apart when they're built on lies. He didn't argue. Later that day, I stopped at a nearby Walmart for some essentials. I didn't need much, just small things, the kind of purchases that remind you life keeps moving. Toothpaste, a new shirt, batteries. But walking those aisles, I realized how light it felt to buy things only for myself. For the first time in years, every choice was mine again. Meanwhile, Emily's silence had turned into noise. I'd gotten word from a mutual friend that she'd started showing up at gatherings she once skipped, laughing too loudly, pretending to be fine. But people could tell. She'd lost the calm she used to weaponize. They said she looked distracted, always checking her phone, waiting for something that never came. Back at my motel that night, I sat by the window and watched the sun drop behind the trees. I thought about how everything had started with 3 days of silence. It felt like a punishment back then. Now I saw it as a test I'd passed without realizing it. She'd wanted control. I'd given her indifference. And indifference, once it takes hold, becomes unshakable. Somewhere in that quiet, I understood that I didn't need to return. She'd already learned her lesson, even if she couldn't admit it yet. The silence she created had come full circle, and now it was hers to live in. By the 3rd week, the world around her had started to shrink. She didn't know that I still had access to our shared cloud storage. Every photo she uploaded, every message she'd backed up, I saw in silence. I wasn't spying. I was studying the collapse. Her smile and pictures looked thinner now. Forced. Even her eyes had that distant look people get when they realize no one's waiting for them anymore. Mutual friends reached out. Some didn't even realize we weren't together. One of them, Jenna, called and said, "Emily's been different. She keeps asking if you're seeing someone." I laughed under my breath. The irony of it. The woman who once said I was predictable was now obsessed with where I'd gone. I didn't answer her questions. I just said, "Tell her I'm fine." Meanwhile, I kept my focus. My business plan was turning into something real. I spent long nights at a rented workspace, the glow of my MacBook lighting up an empty room. Silence wasn't my prison anymore. It was my strategy. Every hour she spent wondering where I'd gone, I spent building something she'd never be part of again. I saw her once, by accident, at Olive Garden, of all places, the same spot where her words had first cut through me. She was with a couple of friends, talking too loudly, pretending to enjoy herself. But she kept glancing at the door, waiting for someone. I stayed in my truck, my Ford F-150 parked far enough that she couldn't see me, watching her like a ghost from another life. When she laughed that night, it didn't sound like the woman I married. It sounded hollow, rehearsed. The kind of laughter that fills silence but doesn't replace it. And for a moment, I felt something I didn't expect, pity. Not for her lies, not for what she lost, but for the emptiness she tried to cover with noise. That evening, I drove back to the motel and deleted the last photo of her from my phone. Not out of hate, out of finality. I realized she could reach out 100 more times, and it wouldn't matter. I wasn't angry. I wasn't waiting. I was done. She had tried to punish me with silence, but I turned it into my weapon. And now, every sound in her world was just an echo of the quiet I left behind. A month passed before she finally reached out directly. The message came late at night, a single line sent from her iPhone. "Can we talk?" No apology, no explanation, just that fragile attempt at control disguised as calm. I stared at it for a while before setting the phone down. I didn't respond. I didn't delete it either. Her words weren't a doorway. They were a reminder of how far I'd already walked past it. Over the next few days, the messages kept coming, each one shorter, more desperate. "Please." Then, "I didn't mean for it to be like this." And finally, "You win." That one made me pause. Because she still didn't understand. This wasn't a game. There was no winning or losing. There was only freedom. I'd learned to live differently now. My mornings started with quiet runs, black coffee, and focus. I'd stopped checking her socials weeks ago, but one evening curiosity won. Her profile was still public. The woman who once filled her feed with confidence now posted cryptic quotes about growth and healing. The comments were polite, supportive, but the tone had changed. People sensed she wasn't the same. Then came the night she showed up. I was at a small restaurant downtown, having dinner alone, when I saw her reflection in the glass. She hesitated at the entrance before walking toward me. For a moment, I thought about leaving, but I stayed seated, calm. When she reached my table, she said softly, "You're hard to find." I looked at her and said nothing. She sat across from me anyway. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "I just wanted to understand," she said. "You used to fight. You used to care. And now, it's like I don't exist." I listened. She was right, but not in the way she thought. She existed, just not in my world anymore. I finally spoke, my voice steady. "You built this silence," I said. "I just stopped trying to break it." She looked at me, searching for the anger she remembered. There was none, only distance. When the waiter brought the check, I placed cash on the table and stood up. She stayed seated, eyes wide, waiting for something more. I didn't give it. I walked past her, calm and certain, leaving her in that quiet space she had once created for me. That night, for the first time, I realized she wasn't chasing me. She was chasing the version of herself that still had my attention. And that version was gone forever. After that night, I didn't hear from her again for a while. But word travels, even when you don't look for it. Josh mentioned she'd been taking time off work, that she seemed off. He said she looked thinner, distracted, quieter. I didn't ask for details, but they came anyway. Stories of her showing up late, forgetting meetings, sitting alone in her car during lunch breaks. The silence she once weaponized had finally turned on her. I focused on my work. My business had grown faster than I expected. Every day felt sharper, more defined. My world had order again. Early mornings, gym sessions, evenings at the office, dinners that didn't end in arguments. Sometimes I'd pass a Target or an Olive Garden and feel the faint pull of memory, but it didn't hurt anymore. It was just background noise to a life I'd already outgrown. Then, one Friday night, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer at first, but the voicemail came through. It was her. Her voice was soft, tired. She said, "I don't know who I am without you, Ethan. I thought silence would make you chase me. I didn't know it would erase me." She paused, then whispered, "You were always the calm one. I see that now." I didn't call back. Not because I was cruel, but because there was nothing left to say. You can't rebuild trust on ashes. And her apology, though genuine, came too late. Some lessons only land when there's no audience left to hear them. The following week, I saw her one last time. She was at a small cafe downtown, sitting by the window, alone. She didn't see me, and I didn't go inside. I watched for a moment, just long enough to see her scrolling through her phone, then stopping, staring out the window, as if searching for someone who might still care. That was when it hit me, how much power there is in silence, when it's not used to manipulate, but to move on. Her world had collapsed, not because I destroyed it, but because I simply stopped showing up in it. When I walked away that day, I didn't look back. Her silence had once been her weapon. Now, it was her prison. And I was finally free from both. It's strange how endings rarely come with a door slam. More often, they arrive quietly, like a morning you wake up and realize you're no longer waiting for anything. That's how it felt a few weeks later. The noise, the chaos, the tension, it had all faded. I'd stopped checking my phone, stopped replaying old conversations in my head. Silence wasn't an absence anymore, it was peace. One morning, I drove past our old house. The front yard looked overgrown, the curtains still drawn tight. Her car was gone. Maybe she'd moved out, maybe she hadn't. Either way, it wasn't my story anymore. I parked for a moment across the street, not to feel nostalgia, but closure. The man who once stood in that driveway begging for attention didn't exist anymore. He'd been replaced by someone colder, calmer, more deliberate. Later that day, I stopped by a small diner, the kind of place where the coffee's always warm and no one asks questions. I sat near the window, sipping black coffee and watching people go about their morning routines. A young couple laughed in the corner, hands intertwined. I didn't envy them. I simply understood the fragility of what they had. Love isn't destroyed by fights or distance. It's destroyed by indifference, and I'd lived long enough to know how quiet that death can be. That afternoon, as I was leaving, a message appeared on my phone. It was from Emily. Short. Final. "I understand now," she wrote. "You didn't disappear. You just stopped showing up where you weren't respected." For a long moment, I just stared at those words. There it was, the closure she'd been chasing. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to add. Some stories end with forgiveness, others with regret. Ours ended with awareness. I drove out of town in my Ford F-150, the road stretching endlessly ahead, sunlight breaking through the clouds. No music, no distractions, just the sound of tires on asphalt and a sense of quiet that felt earned. For 3 days, she had given me silence, believing it would make me crawl back. But silence doesn't always wound. Sometimes it heals. Sometimes it becomes the space where you remember who you are. And as the city disappeared in my rearview mirror, I finally understood something simple and irreversible. Her silence hadn't broken me. It had crowned me. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.